Oh, before you came.
Well,
So I think that we just go.
Share screen.
Yeah, that should.
That's fine. We can start there.
From that.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Yeah, totally ready.
Well, you're good. You don't need me touching
No, it's fine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the CTL and Marlo Daly Galliano, and we're so happy to have you here and to have Dr. Jace Saplan here with us. Jace serves as the Director of Choral Activities and is the Assistant Professor of Music at the University of Hawaii, where he teaches courses in graduate choral conducting and choral literature, conducts the University of Hawaii Chamber Singers, and oversees the graduate choral conducting program. Known for his work celebrating Pacifica choral traditions, he is the artistic director of the Navai Chamber Choir and Namamo Vocal Ensemble, Hawaii-based professional vocal ensembles dedicated to the preservation and propagation of Native choral performance. His research focuses on decolonial approaches to the choral arts, queering choral conducting pedagogy, and trauma-informed rehearsal practices. So we're so happy.
Just yeah, we're stoked. We're very excited.
Well,
Yeah.
to have you here
Yeah.
today with us, and I'd like to begin our time here by reading our land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to turn things over to Jace. We at Lewis Clark State College gathered today in Seminicum, Lewiston, on the indigenous homelands of the Nimipu Nez Perce tribe. We acknowledge the Nimipu as original caretakers since time immemorial and recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and to their ancestors. We wish to take this opportunity to express our deepest appreciation and respect for the ongoing relationship built between Lewis Clark State College and the Nez Perce tribe. Thank you.
Ke lei mai la o ka ua I ke kahi e ha o ka lama a oni I hou ua mali he e ha a mali e ua pa e ka inu waila ke inu maila na hala o no e I ke kai no hala no nawe no puna e ka wahine no ka ua no I kila we a aloha e a. Aloha, everyone. I am so incredibly excited to share space with you all on the lands of the Nimipu Nez Perce tribe, who have taught us that water is a citation, that the earth is a textbook, and that community is our greatest teacher and perhaps the answer to the problems that we encounter within structures of today's society. I always wonder what life is like for all of us positioned in the middle, positioned in the spaces in between. And I've encountered that, especially during these past 15 months, as someone that is untenured, going through the tenure process this year, someone that is queer, someone that is multiracial, someone that is Native, someone that is so many things to so many people. And yet, as we step into the vast diversity of who we are, we realize that the net of our responsibilities tethered to our role as facilitators of learning perhaps becomes infinite. And when we think about that space in which we dwell, this great intersection, what and how do we find ourselves, and how do we find ourselves, and in what ways can we find ourselves so that we are better able to serve on the precipice of owning and acknowledging both our privilege and oppression? I don't know where I went with that. So I think it's so great to be here, but I think like in this acknowledging, what I'm hoping to do today in our quick little hour together is to share a little bit of my upcoming book project, which is called Decolonizing Pedagogies, and hopefully present some meaningful takeaways in which we can all enact within our own respective roles. Because the most humongous learning outcome that I hope that we all get today is that my decolonization journey and my way of facilitating decolonization is different. And it will always be different for every single person, because the journey starts with completely owning your own specific narrative and how it interweaves with the community that you serve. It's so great to be here. It's so good to see you all. It's so great to be back here in this beautiful space. Man, you folks really know how to host folks. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I just said something that we all said on Zoom. Just gonna go ahead and share my screen. So I'm gonna toggle back and forth between reading and just like speaking extemporaneously, if it's okay with you. This title, can everyone see okay? Okay. Comes from this melody or this song, and it goes like this. Walavam hako ikapo haku. We are satisfied with the stones, astonishing food of the land. What I have to say, and what it all boils down to, is that what we do as facilitators of learning in higher education, whether you're faculty, staff, tenured, or untenured, is that it all comes back to land on the precipice of decoloniality. Countless Native musicians, scholars, elders, mothers, aunties, such as Lily Kalakame'elehiva, my personal mentor, full professor of Hawaiian Studies at the University of Hawaii, Mary Kavena Pukui, who has lived in the middle between Western knowledge and research and the ability of caring for a community so that Native knowledge lives on. And even my mother, Marilyn Melilina Esposo, states that the act of belonging to each other, of action to connect to joy, to right wrongs, is all contingent upon our relationship to the land that we stand on and how we choose to regard it as a resource, as a teacher, as a sibling, as a parent, or perhaps even a deity. In thinking through the title of our session together, Aipohaku, translated to the eating of stones, this Native Hawaiian phenomena traces the concept of how discorded dialogue, harmful action, the illegalization of critical race theory, and the instigation of how injustices occur at the site of our content areas, of how acculturating bodies away from one's ancestral memory, and feeding them through the precipice of disconnect, that what should occupy their brain is Socrates instead of Gloria Ladson Billings, of dishonoring identities, of the interrogation of our relationship to the land, in which it's something that we own. In the singing and the thinking and the being within our communities, we're called to specify this relationship then. Who owns the land? What does ownership mean in the space of academia? And where does the lineage of citation come from when you think about ownership? Can everyone say this word with me? Aina. Aina means land. But when you speak a language that only has 12 consonants and 4 vowels, words mean a lot of things. So Aina means land, Aina means citation, weird. Aina means textbook, what? Do you see what I'm trying to say here? When you think about things through that native space, everything is connected. And perhaps this fundamental concept when we think about in higher education where we pick things apart, which is important, we forget to put it back together again. So then how in our scaffolding, when we think about our syllabi, what happens after the assessment? What happens after the final? Do we hold space in the stressful space of assessment to allow things to breathe and to find connection back to the source, to the pico, to day one? The lyrics that are on this screen come from a song, because I'm a choir teacher, I'm a music professor. I love music so much, I can barely stand it. Comes from the composition Kalana na Pua, written by Ellen Keho'i Vau Kalani Ray Prendergast. I think Hawaiian names are so beautiful. Because especially after colonization, we have an English name, we have a Hawaiian name, and many of us identify as mixed race. So we have another middle name, and then a last name. For example, my name is Jace Koholokula Kiakelani Peng Mei Lapitan Saplan. English, Hawaiian, Chinese, Filipino. How beautiful is that, to regard yourself in the name? So this specific line traces a song of protest in which this composition served as a sonic banner after the annexation of the Hawaiian Kingdom to the United States of America through the unearthing of a concept called aipohaku, eating of stones. Aipohaku means to eat rocks, and it's a radical metaphor of how far one will go to protect and preserve one's ancestral lands, to the point that if stolen, annexed, or colonized away from native realities and spaces of learning, because Aina means many things, it is better to eat the rocks of your ancestral lands to sustain a body for future generations and preserve it within your body to protect Aina, than to succumb to the inevitable desecration of land, of our bodies, of concepts of ownerships, of traditions, and of our way of viewing the world. So to eat rocks is to prioritize ancestral memory. To eat rocks is to save the world. To eat rocks is to save higher education. In our time together, we will eat rocks. So let's just quickly go over our scope, our goals and our takeaways. Is just to note the importance of employing a decolonial philosophy and find actionable takeaways for the classroom. That's it, 2 things. I teach a seminar called Regarding Land. And it is an interdisciplinary course for students within the College of Arts, Languages, and Letters, a college in which I serve as the director of the School of the Arts for. This class is meant to interrogate the ways in how we can connect Native knowledge within the spaces of higher education. This is a picture of their final. Their final was to construct a professional learning community for the educators of Molokai using land as a resource. What they did was interview, through open-ended interviews, the elders of Molokai to offer an entire workshop in which the elders were positioned as teachers to teach teachers how to engage with stories, with legends, with mo'olelo that were prevalent during the later 1900s. We tend to think that Native knowledge and that knowledge outside of the Western tradition lives in a box tied away from chronology. How unfortunate that is when we put a boundary in our Western ways of thinking that these lives and these narratives cannot actively engage with the time of now. So when we had these elders come in, they weren't necessarily telling stories of Pele, the goddess of the volcano. They were telling stories of the first time they heard their child laugh while playing in the lo'i within the taro patch. They're sharing stories of how important it was when a community came together to put out the communal fire. And they were telling stories of how they would weave lei together and what lei specifically they wove whenever a child was brought into the community. Consequently, these educators, their charge from the curation of my students was to create a curriculum for 6th graders based off of the stories of elders. Ah, I love them. Look at them. Oh, also look at that space. Oh, okay, Molokai. Serving a sunny day. Noting that specific story that I told, and noting that most of the concepts that I draw upon in that classroom of regarding land is built upon a decolonial understanding, it's time for us to kind of think about what decolonization means to you. So if I were to just ask you to just jot down in your brain, on a piece of paper, on your phone, whatever, what is decolonization? How would you engage with that definition? What does that mean to you? Just think about that for a second. Any brave, miraculous human beings would like to share? What does decolonization mean to you?
When I think about that, that implies making something. Fixing it, repairing it, it's gonna look different, it's going to be in the same space together on the creation similarly.
Could we get snaps for that? Wow, me, thank you. Sorry, I love snapping and clapping and regarding and celebrating all those things. So I want to just, I want us to consider a thing too, like that was fabulous. Now, can we build from there and construct a definition based off of what you have that doesn't have words that start with R-E, D-E, or U-N? Anybody? What about you, friend?
I was thinking safety, creating a safe space to.
Safety. I love that. Maybe we would just throw out a word. What about you, friend?
Openness.
Openness. Oh, do you see something in the chat? We got something in the chat. Welcoming, Marcy, you're amazing. I agree 1000%. Can you see the chat? Oh, you can't. Okay, this is cool. Hybrid learning. I meant teaching. That's fine. What is important to consider is that decolonization means many things to each person, right? We said this before. Now, the scholar that I draw from the most in my work is Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, who wrote the book Decolonizing the Academy or Decolonizing Methodologies. Linda Tuhiwai-Smith is a Maori scholar. She comes and now teaches at the University of Otago. I studied with her for 3 consecutive summers, and she has done so much in holding space for Native knowledge in academic, institutional, and also the arts, and situating this knowledge as teacher, not as a museum artifact. Remember the distance and the boundary that we place within this knowledge. Now, she states that colonization is invasion, a group of people taking over the land and imposing their own culture and systems upon the Native and Indigenous people that situates a power structure that benefits the oppressor. Takeaways that come from that definition are very, very clear because then we understand that colonization is so much more than physical. Colonization is so much more than physical. Therefore, it's directly applicable to the magic that we create in the classroom. Because the words that we say, the responses that we get back, the thoughts that are generated within these spaces of magic exists on what we call the pull or the ancestral plane. When someone is in a space of safety, when someone is in a space of openness, we are then in a space of sanctuary for a Native person. When I chant, when we do a land acknowledgement, the purpose of what that is for so many Native folks is so that they can enact their learning in a space of decoloniality. What happens if your land acknowledgement was a subscription to the idea that when we utter these words upon the ancestral plane of the pole, I am holding your life, the life of the land, the citation, the textbook in high regard. It is a subscription to openness and bravery. So the words that I say and the actions that I curate and model in the classroom are based upon your safety and openness. Because colonization is more than physical. It is a cultural and psychological phenomena in determining whose knowledge is privilege. In this, colonization not only impacts the first generation colonized, but creates enduring issues on a legacy of generational trauma. And this idea of generational trauma happens in a choral classroom, in a literature classroom, in a STEM classroom. It is prevalent throughout because we are all tied to a structure, a system. Higher education is tied to a structure, a system. What am I doing? What's going on here? Well, I'm going to stop share. Everyone okay? Okay, thank you. So then, based off of the genius responses I got about decolonization, I get this definition from Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Anyone familiar with him? Kenyan writer, scholar, and also performing artist who wrote the critical essay of Decolonizing the Mind. He defines decolonization as the dismantling of colonial systems that were established during the period of time when a nation maintains dominion over dependent territories. That's very hyper-specific, right? And coming from a situated lived experience that is more far removed for Hawaiian experiences or for Native experiences, there's still so many connections that we can find. The key takeaway then is the discussion of systems, noting that higher education is connected to place, to neighborhoods, to education systems, to faith-based systems at the K-12 level, all serve the stewardship of ideas, of cultures, and of practices. But whose ideas, whose cultures, and whose practices are amplified and therefore diminished? Who are we actively remembering within our syllabi, and who could we be potentially forgetting, while still honoring the fact that we are one person? Friends, my definition of decolonization is the decentering of systems. Can everyone say the word PICO with me? PICO, yeah. So PICO means umbilical cord. PICO means circle. PICO means this is PICO. Look at how we're situated right now. It's so interesting to me that when we try to create safety, and when we try and we read a statement in which we try to live, we try to embody them, right? A brave space statement, Brene Brown, right? An emergent space statement, a PICO, a land acknowledgement, the subscription to decoloniality. And then if we were to say the words, okay, find a seat after these iterations and incantations, this is what happens. I love it when we're in a circle because power is shared, right? Power is distributed evenly. The space of the speaker is in direct connection to the needs of the community. And so when I think about decentering, PICO is at this heart's core because decentering connects so beautifully to this image of a circle, either expanding or a circle spotlighting on the needs of a community that needs active help and support from those that are privileged. The reason why I take off my glasses and put on my glasses is because I get that eyeglass fog. You know what I'm talking about? I literally cannot see without them, so I don't know what I'm doing with them. Oh, what fun. Okay. Before I go there, I just wanted to read this quick paragraph. So when we think about the decentering of systems, right, it's a constant reflective process on how our work can support and repair and amplify all members within our community. right? It's not just focusing on the native, focusing on the indigenous. It means that we all in this space have the courage to look at our training, to look at our expertise, to look at our terminal degree, and be willing to find the faults and harm that came from these traditions, that came from our learning, and be willing to situate ourselves by looking inward and looking at the trajectory of higher education and having the bravery and the courage to position ourselves as the learner. What happens if what we do in the classroom is not just us regurgitating information on the precipice of expertise, but being a crucial component in openness and bravery of showing others how we model learning and curiosity and engagement based off the identities that we have. What does safety look like when we connect with others? It is the philosophy to see kinship and connection. This idea of mo'oku au hau, I won't have you say that. This idea of mo'oku au hau, or this idea of lineage, genealogical ties, how we see connection in an indigenous way between Socrates and Foucault, and Ladson Billings, and Pythagoras, and Martin Luther, and Judith Butler, and regarding the communal protocol at the Dakota Access Pipeline, at Mauna Kea, on the streets led by Black trans women. It's all upon a lineage of intersectionality connected to the suffragists of Great Britain. Decoloniality is tracing connection between opposites, dismantling power between the progressive and conservative, the binary and the Likert scale of gender, and positioning structures of the traditional and radical regarding all of those perspectives and positioning it as learner connected in a circle, as rocks to eat to sustain the good for generations to come. Through this story, one skill is integral in enacting a decolonial philosophy. And according to wayfinders, Polynesian wayfinders like my best friend, Polynesian navigator Sesi Ha'o, look at her, what a smolder. We must kilo and question. When you think, if we were to observe your teaching in the classroom, something that I'm always curious about, whether I'm working with teachers, graduate students, undergraduate students, is your ratio between your statements that ends in periods or questions. If you were to actively reflect and think and visit yourself in the classroom, maybe the most recent thing that you taught, what is the ratio between statements and questions? A decolonial classroom embodies and celebrates inquiry. And there's a way in which we can enact the statements through questions, because what we have to share is connected upon the ancestral lineage of wisdom. We are more than ourselves. So what I mean by questioning, what I mean by, like, I'm not necessarily thinking about Socratic method. What I'm thinking about is empathetic observation and empathetic inquiry. Translated from English to Hawaiian to English, kilo can mean stargazer, observer, a seer. However, translations fail, as we all know, especially those of us that work in different languages. So to go further, to use English, I'd like to envision kilo as observing specifically for the purpose of connection, of how to connect through inquiry, or how one can connect through inquiry for the purpose of honoring boundary of identity. While a philosophy can be a series of statements that guide our artistic and administrative and pedagogical work, one aspect can transform the organizational perspective is to situate our compass away from statements to questions through observations. Questions seek connection. Questions model how we can exist while honoring boundary. Questions help guide the philosophy. Questions can redistribute power and unearth trauma towards healing. Questions honor observations of the other and invite the unseen to be seen. Now, a quick exercise for us. What is your teaching philosophy in 2 to 3 sentences? You're like, how dare? My teaching philosophy is, this is a good exercise. I challenge myself to this often. What is your teaching philosophy in 2 to 3 sentences? Let's take like 3 minutes to do that. As I sip this coffee. For those of you on Zoom, can you hear me okay? We'll take 1 more minute and then I would like for us to share. If it's okay. Thanks, Marcy. How we doing, friends? I have to say, I'm the exact same person whenever I go to PD. I'm the post-it person.
They were just in front of me.
Yeah, I have an orange one for hmms, a pink one for aha, and I have a green one for huh. So would you mind sharing a little bit of your teaching philosophy?
Yeah, okay. My 3 sentences, and they're actually sentence fragments.
Okay.
Promoting empathy and critical inquiry, empowering students to ask productive questions, inspiring the drive to learn more.
Mind doing steps for that? Our work here is done. No, I'm joking. What about you, friend?
Let's see. So, your recent things made me think back to the spring of studies class, and we really emphasized margins to the center. The center and the margin. So, or the marginalized. So, and always contextualize. So, no words on the page that people, no just words on the page, always context, always. And then, just kind of like a one thing with students, you can do more than you think.
I have a hard time modeling that, so I appreciate you for saying that. I'm like, there was like, sometimes I'm like, don't let me say sorry today. Sorry. I meant, I'm not sorry. I meant, that was really rude. I'm sorry. Wait, stop. Yeah. I'm working on that for sure. Thank you for sharing. Did I ask you to share a little bit?
Trying to figure out where you are, thinking, and that's a whole other thing that means. I'm an organic chemist, so that's the next.
I like that. Thank you. What's so interesting when you take a look at your teaching philosophy and when you think about it and housing it in a statement, right? We then situate ourselves and having a power dynamic with ourselves, right? It takes a lot, I think, for us to write something down that ends in a period, right? The cycles and the hoops that we jump through and the synapses that fire, you know, in terms of how academia is on a quest to prove legitimacy of standards of how we ascend the tenure ladder and how we deem what is worthy and how within the RRB system is based off of ethics and morality. We're so naturally tuned to question because we're curious, right? There's safety in the question. And so like, if we think about this exercise then that we got going on, and, if you took your teaching philosophy and placed it in kilo, right? If these questions had to be, or if these statements, come on, Jace, if these statements had to be questions, what would change, right? What would change in the philosophy? You know, so as we think about the teaching philosophy and its place in our dossier, the teaching philosophy and how it actively connects to what we do in the classroom, the teaching philosophy and how it actively connects to what our career will look like 5 to 10 years from now, your personal career and the entire professoriate of this institution or all institutions of higher education. What happens if you placed your philosophy on the precipice of lineage so that you are actively able to engage and reflect? For example, when I served as a consultant in decolonizing philosophies, and this was for our community college system for UH, we had so many department heads say, we believe in the goodness of our content area, period, right? We support the programming and study of knowledge bases from Black, Indigenous people of color. And I put plus, that's a shorthanded way of saying LGBTQIA plus communities. Great, that's awesome. And that's really great. And I applaud you for that. But as someone that occupies the identities at the intersection, as someone that is brown and Native and queer, the questions allow me to see your thought process. The questions allow me to see how I am connected to the jigsaw of goodness that you are putting out there into the world. So once we consulted with Honolulu Community College, it quickly began to be, what goodness can my content area bring to my community? How can my students affirm their complex web of identities through my syllabi? How can I repair systematic harm through my content area? How can my curriculum immediately create safety and belonging in order to scaffold towards empathetic resilience? This is applicable to all of our content areas, to all components of a university, and very important to embody as we think about becoming more decolonial in our process. It is gracefully interrogating a statement or the audacity of a period so that we can find the goodness for the whole. So when it comes to shaping a philosophy then and enacting what are the deliverables and how that will be actualized in the classroom, we have to consider how and where we cite our sources. Where is your aina, right? Where is your land? Is the same thing as where are your citations? That's such a, whenever I put myself in that Hawaiian headspace, I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because this is my aina, based off of who my students are, where my institution is, what I value as an educator, are all in the mix in enacting my decolonial philosophy. So if you think about those questions, who is your land? Who is your land? Land as entity, as sibling, as parent, as citation. These individuals that you see here at the center in that snazzy red cardigan that I want to borrow is Linda Tuhivai Smith, who we discussed, one of the first first indigenous Maori women to receive a PhD in the academy. To the left in the red polo is Dr. Kawanoi Kamana, who started Ka'umeke Ka'eo, a K-12 Hawaiian charter school, started in the early 90s, that was the first charter school after a full century of the legalization of the Hawaiian language, in which she went all the way up to the United States government and said, we need to start learning Hawaiian again. Can we ensure that the Hawaiian language be legalized? It is because of her that people like me can say, my first language is the Hawaiian language. And situated upon my journey, a decolonial journey in which my life allowed my mother and my father to hug their inner child because they were beaten for speaking Hawaiian. And here I am in Idaho for speaking Hawaiian. I love it. This is Dr. Pualani Kanahele, the first to receive a PhD from the University of Hawaii in dance, Hawaiian dance. This is the topic of my dissertation and the compass of my life, Queen Kalani, the last queen of the monarchy of Hawaii, but also a beloved choral composer. And here's Dr. Fumiko. She is the first PhD Native Hawaiian woman in biology, whose entire dissertation was about creating an infrastructure for labeling Hawaiian names for limu based off of their medicinal properties. All of these humans employ decolonial practice in their communities, or decolonial practice within higher education, and connected higher education to the service of the community. 3 concepts that we're going to talk about in the last 15 minutes and step into a place of reflection on what this looks like for your aina. The first is called action rooted in pilina. Can everyone say the word pilina, please? Wow, your Hawaiian is amazing. When we think about action rooted in pilina, it's this shape. It's a fern. Talk more about in a second. Process rooted within community. And finally, the value of mo'olelo. Can you say that with me? Very good. Kupuna and ritual. Just kidding. Pilina tells us that in moments of solace, when we question the legitimacy of our expertise, when we think that we are alone in this world, when we think that we are in our corner, banging up against the wall, shouting affirmations of what we can do better as a society, only to be silenced, Pilina tells us that we are never alone. Pilina tells us that in those moments, we bring our ancestors, our elders, our kupuna, our elders, with us always, and we carry their hopes and dreams, which guide and impact our work. Our learning is their learning. Our work is their work. Consequently, when we look at our organizations and institutions, not solely as people, our students as well, we look at our students not solely as people, but as carriers of lineages, a knot in the cord of a genealogy of hopes and dreams and trauma. Our work immediately becomes so much more reverent, our responsibility to each other much more urgent. So when we act in pilina with each other, we are called upon to kilo our relationship and lineage to the community, the land, the student, the administrative structure. What is my relationship to this place or land? Am I a familiar? Am I a visitor? Is this classroom, textbook, assignment, my grandfather's home or my grandmother's exile? Based on the identities and cultural atmosphere in which I stand in and on, do I carry privilege? Do I carry oppression? Do the lineages that I bring into this space weave with my students in ways that carry trauma between the artifact we are studying, the words that I am stating, and the work that they bring into the classroom? How do I exist and lead in this space and land? In other words, our relationship to the community And land is constantly expanding and evolving throughout our time. Whether you've been here for a long time, whether you just arrived, it is important to reflect on your pilina to your students, to your community. It is so much more complex than saying, I'm going to step into a choral space now. So much more complex than saying we would not rehearse Mozart the same way we rehearse a piece by Liliuokalani. It is looking at the system, the lineage to establish relationship, not censorship. Pilina tells us that Mozart is a teacher to my student, just as much as Liliuokalani is a teacher to my student. But here's the thing though, are we working to build active connection, not just from content to student, but from content to content? Does Mozart teach Liliuokalani? That's easy. But does Liliuokalani teach Mozart? And what assignments, classroom protocols, whatever it may be, exist in which the student can regard the entire curriculum as connection? One of the ways that I love doing this, I love doing this type of work with, in a very practical way that I hope can exist in a whole bunch of content areas, is a simple exercise in stating what if Gloria Ladson-Billings, the matriarch of culturally responsive pedagogy, had a conversation with Gotsky, an educational theorist on scaffolding. What would 5 minutes of a conversation look like between these two? This is a podcast project for my students in education, right? If Liliuokalani had a conversation with Mozart, can we act it out? I'll give you 5 minutes. If your grandmother that taught you the song Dahil Sayo could provide commentary on the Vivaldi Gloria, how could we position your grandmother's sonic lineage to inform our work with the Vivaldi? It's not shying away from content that is outside of their cultural purview. It's providing them points of connection so that their self, their lineage, and their bodies and what they connect to is positioned just as much as a teacher as the entire canon of Eurocentric scholarship. It's not forgetting, it's decentering, it's expanding. Oh, I'm sorry, I wanted to talk about this picture. So when I think about Pilina, it's always about this aspect of weaving. My mother is a master weaver. It's Pilina, when we Pilina with lauhala or dried leaves, it's very similar to basket weaving almost. But we do it with bracelets, but what's most important is these mats. And when we weave a lauhala mat, that is not for us to set foot on. When there's a lauhala mat in the classroom, that is the space in which the elder occupies, in which the younger generation, from the mentorship of that middle generation, coaches the younger generation to make as an act of gratitude for the elder. Everyone has a role in that society. But I really just am fascinated with how one weaves, because you are going towards connection, coming out of it to honor your own boundaries and your own needs, only to be connected yet again. It's such a beautiful process to me. These are my students for music and community. It's a class that I teach, and they're not just simply picking up trash on a beach. What they're doing is they are picking up trash in front of our elders' home, Auntie Nola. And Auntie Nola is a master at making percussion instruments in the Native Hawaiian tradition. And so their role or their job in working with Auntie Nola was to think about the importance of sustainability and its connection to music education. And they thought, hey, do indigenous concepts apply in making sustainable instruments. And so we have this horrifying experience recently with microplastics arriving on our shores. So this happens with the fishermen in Tokyo and on the West Coast. And they'll pull out gallons or other fishing equipment and just throw it into the ocean, and it lands here on Oahu and Molokai especially. And it's done so much damage to our ocean life and the ecosystems within our aina. So they're collecting all these microplastics to work with our chemistry department so that we can create indigenous instruments based off of things that we found on our aina. Since a lot of our indigenous resources, such as like koa wood, are dying rapidly, we're finding new ways to create native musics. And all of this highlights this idea of process within community. 3 questions that I always ask myself is, am I facilitating versus leading? Am I co-constructing, co-researching and collaborating with my community? And is this work in service to the collaborators of the community? These are very centered within the ethics of good anthropological practice. But I think in a decolonial context, this all circles back at how it benefits the community. Now, if we were to think about our respective syllabi, I'm going rogue for a second and ignoring what I have written down. If we were to think about our syllabi for a second as situating through our content area, how can we solve communal need through this class, right? That's one of the things in which I situate all of my classes upon. This class will help and create a structure through their final project to help serve Hawaii's unsheltered community. Every single time that our choral program rehearses or creates, our concerts are always tied to what is the solution of communal vocal music to creating a better society for our state, right? Most recently, we did that with, especially during a time of social distancing and locked in place, where they worked with the Waikiki Japanese Center to bring a virtual Obon festival for our Japanese elders. And so they would construct all of these microrhythms, sing all of these folk songs so that our elders could dance in their living rooms on Zoom. And every single student was in charge of creating a folk song or a new composition of a folk song that they paired with an elder, worked with the elder danced for the student, and then they were able to step into this very crucial traditional practice that we have in these islands for our Japanese community. This idea of process rooted within community directly engages with our syllabi, not necessarily just our pedagogy. If we were to think about what good will bring to my community in this class, what is one assignment, one assessment, one project in which this directly ties to the neighborhoods of Lewiston? Can you imagine how quickly the university can position itself as a partner to the community? This doesn't need to happen from a top-down approach in which a provost or a dean says, let's go out and pick up trash on the sidewalk. This is structural change in which students can actually see that I can do this at any specific level, no matter how I am positioned within the community. Oh, time, such short time we have left, that's okay. Mo'olelo, can you say that one more time? Kupuna. So I talked a little bit about the value of stories and legends in terms of mo'olelo, but this idea of narrative within your classroom, in which the ratio not is only between periods and questions, but how much of your students' narrative actively take place in your curriculum design. And it's hard, right? Because syllabus day happens and it's that first day and you're like, I gotta write my syllabus. You write it, you do it, they see it. But what happens if there's space in the syllabi in which can actively welcome flexibility so that students could step into that role to share their narrative and seek how that narrative interweaves with your content area. For example, for one of the music classes that I teach, music and sustainability, a portion of that class is, can you write and compose a song that directly connects to an experience around communal need and communal change, right? This entire class gave you the skills. What will you do now with these skills to seek and serve community? What I mean now by kupuna, it directly ties to aina and citation and textbook. How often do we bring the elder into the classroom? This is something that K-12 schools have begun to do better work in terms of like elders in the classroom, kupuna in the classroom, especially for Native and Indigenous serving institutions. But what's interesting is that we do not regard the elder as a resource in spaces of higher education. And I think that is so heartbreaking, because when we are giving the undergraduate these skills that will directly tie to community, that is the most integral component to bring in an elder to charge the student with how to use those skills. When we position community and we position elder, the beautiful thing about holding space with an elder in a Native and decolonial context is that the elder surpasses tense. You know, this idea of was, is. When an elder holds space in the classroom, they can bridge the gap between the past, the present, and the future. We actively try to have an elder in each class at least once a month at the University of Hawaii in our music department. This completely changed our teaching. I'll never go back. Because in a choral classroom, in a music classroom, even in an education classroom, I have our students do their micro teaching, right? Or to do their practice teaching. And I'll say something about scaffolding, like, oh, we need to scaffold this concept better. The elder will say, that did not make sense to me. You didn't own your narrative. Who are you gonna listen to? Not me. You're gonna listen to that. And what is it? They reaffirmed what I said, but it speaks to the heart's core, right? The other example is like when I can teach an ensemble about a specific song. We did the song The Hill Sayo, and I know I'm running out of time. I have a minute left. The elder will come in. I'll teach the notes, I'll teach rhythms and say, this is an important song for this community. An elder comes in and said, I had this song sung during my wedding, and it has been my greatest joy. You can't, I mean, we can try to curate as much as we can, but when an elder's in a classroom, they bring the world with them. So how can we actively engage with elders in the classroom? Friends, I talked at you quite a bit. I'm really grateful for your time. I'm hoping that we provided some meaningful takeaways for you all. And just thank you for your hour. Mahalo nui. Thank you.
I need to go rewrite my whole lecture.
I know.
Yes,
yes.
Oh my gosh, you're talking about answer